One of the reasons Pele became such an icon, I believe, was that his name was an easy one to pronounce. Imagine the commentators trying to say Edson Arantes do Nascimento, right? And the lesson I've drawn from there is naming things is extremely important in today's day and time. Probably no bigger example than how Apple was named and how beautifully it set itself apart at the time against something called International Business Machine or IBM.
You have written very interesting subjects and it's received a very nice critical review also and being very popular also. If you could show us the book and what it's been about briefly. So
my first book was The Madness Starts at 9. The Madness Starts at 9. And just like any startup and how I explained, it was born out of frustration. So I was getting increasingly frustrated with the absurdity of corporate life and my day-to-day existence. And I thought that surely this should be expressed more productively because A, not only would it serve as a method for me to purge my own frustrations, B, maybe there is something I can do on a larger scale because I think there are a lot more people feeling the same way and they need a sort of voyeuristic avenue where, they can purge all their feelings. Out of that feeling was born The Madness Starts at 9. And I initially started it as episodic stories, which I used to blog first at a site called indiantelevision.com. And then subsequently, I put it up at sulekha.com, where I won a nationwide blogging contest. So what is the book about? The book is set in an agency, same set of characters are there throughout all the stories. Okay. Some new entrants here and there. Okay. And it looks at milestones in corporate life. And the whole question I asked myself is, can this be looked at in a funny way? So the titles are things like True Lies. True Lies is a look at the interview process because neither the person who is giving it nor the person who's taking it is actually sticking to the truth. They are indulging it in what is called creative distortions of the truth. Okay. The chapter on performance appraisals is called A Myth Called Performance Appraisals, which is self-explanatory, right? The chapter on office parties is called Wait Until Dark, because in the darkness of an office party, a lot of things happen. The chapter on summer internships is called I Knew What You Did Last Summer, things like that. So there are very punny titles. And one of the reasons that it became a book was because of this character called Chaila. When I was writing this book, it was tending to get a little long. So I am not like that. I am somebody who likes punchlines. So it was based on an observation that the canteen guys I saw at most offices were really cued into everything and they were far smarter than people gave them credit for. And secondly was the fact that I like chai whenever I'm thinking. So an idea comes like a breath of fresh air and it just comes and goes. So Chaila is a manifestation of that knowledge within us all, okay, which comes and goes. So that's the reason it became so popular. It's also a good pun. The second book.
One second. After you wrote this book, which was obviously inspired from people around you, situations around you. So once they read it, did they come back to say, is this me? Or do I do like this? And, how, or people found it refreshing that you've looked at it humorously, you've given them a frame of reference that makes it, easier to assimilate frustrations.
So,
I'm talking about the people in your life, not the viewers.
Yeah. So, actually, I think I did a good job of hiding my source of inspiration.
I see.
Because, and it was, I think that is what being creative is all about. I did not want it to be a straight reference to a person I knew. But everything there is from people I have seen, meetings I have been at. I've just stretched it to a ridiculous extent. So it's much funnier,
That's true.
and a lot of people found it immensely relatable because they know that happens. So that was the Madness Starts at 9. My second book is called Lessons from the Playground.
Yeah. Okay.
Lessons from the Playground.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Lessons from the Playground is because I am a sporting junkie. I was the kind of person who used to turn to the last page of the newspaper first and then read it backwards, because for me sports was more important than anything else that was happening at a point in time. So I had all this knowledge about sport, and I had this habit of correlating it with various things always. It was a book waiting to happen in many ways. So I had to structure it. So how do you structure all of this into some sort of a coherent narrative? So I did the 4 P's: people, platforms, processes, and pinnacles. So people is stars from the world of sport, and I chose 5: Pele, Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, Roger Federer, Sachin Tendulkar. So I looked at their life stories and what lessons can you derive thereof. Platforms is the great stages in sport, like Olympics, World Cup soccer, World Cup cricket, Wimbledon, things like that. So what do you derive from these stages? Processes is the processes that you see in sports. So various sports have different kinds of rituals. Captaincy also is a process. Barcelona's playing style is a process. So I looked at that. And pinnacles is once in a lifetime achievements, which probably will not get repeated. Like Roger Bannister running the mile under 4 minutes, or Kapil Dev scoring 175 against Zimbabwe, or Maradona winning the World Cup on his own, or Michael Phelps and what he has done. So each of these is an interesting way to, my whole idea was to welcome the adrenaline rush of sport into boardroom thinking. And just to cite 3 examples, entertaining ones, is I don't think anybody, not many people rather, know who Edson Arantes do Nascimento is. Edson Arantes do Nascimento. Now that's the real name of Pele. One of the reasons Pele became such an icon, I believe, was that his name was an easy one to pronounce. Imagine the commentators trying to say Edson Arantes do Nascimento, right? And the lesson I've drawn from there is naming things is extremely important in today's day and time. Probably no bigger example than how Apple was named and how beautifully it set itself apart at the time against something called International Business Machine, or IBM. One of the biggest selling points in the Apple story is the fact that it named itself in such an interesting and friendly manner. So that's one, naming yourself. Then the second is, I was always fascinated by Muhammad Ali, great hero of mine. And the one thing that I noticed about Muhammad Ali was that he was the first sports person, I think, who understood the value of the press conference. In fact, he's by far the most quotable sportsman in history, because you should see the kind of quotes he's come up with at the press conferences. So he used to tell his opponents, so it's both the boxers are sitting face to face, and he tells one of them, I saw you shadow boxing once. Your shadow was winning. And another, he tells them, if you even dreamt of beating me, you should wake up and apologize. Right? So the interesting thing about that was Ali, who was a very smart man, understood that the press conference was an opportunity to score psychological points on his opponent. And it ties back to Sun Tzu's great quote from the Art of War. Every battle is won before it is fought. Right? So that is the second. And the third, last example from Lessons from the Playground I want to give is about the Olympic marathon. And the marathon was run for 26 miles, basically. And it cites back to an old Greek story, which I won't get into right now. But at the London Olympics, because they wanted the marathon to finish at the gates of Buckingham Palace, they added 385 yards to the marathon, right? Now, ever since, this has been the distance for the marathon, 26 miles, 385 yards. And this gives us the idea of question conventions. Why are you taking it at face value? The reason they added 385 yards was specific only for that year's event, and yet it has persisted. Just like if you look at the keyboard format, it came from typewriters. Many keyboards have this QWERTY format. And the reason it is like that is because the engineers wanted to slow down the typists so that those mechanisms would not get jammed. But once computers and phones came, that problem was not there. And yet many laptops still have that QWERTY format. So question old conventions. That's another interesting idea from Lessons from the Playground. And there are probably 100 more such from the book. My last book, or my most
catch hold of the
recently...
book if you want more. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Please. My last or most recently released book is called Sportivity. And as the name suggests, it's a juxtaposition of the three most favorite things in my life: sport plus wit plus creativity. Sport plus wit plus creativity. And it's about 10 ideation techniques which I've seen emerge from sport, but which have relevance in far broader areas in life. Now, one of them is, let's say, I was looking at the founding story of Rafael Nadal. One of the interesting incidents in his career was, as a junior, he was two-fisted on his forehand. Okay, his uncle told him, take one hand off. And that liberated Nadal's forehand and made it one of the most fearsome strokes in the game ever. So the idea there is what Mies van der Rohe had brilliantly put many years back: less is more. You can always do more by focusing on less. Case in point is Google. Google, when it came to be, there were a lot of other portals around, and a lot of them were concentrating on many things. Google, for a long while, chose to focus only on search. And this decision really defined it as a brand, because people began developing the perception that because if it does only one thing, it must be very good at it, right? I think a good Indian example is, I think, Move from Paras Pharma. Move was up against big heavyweights in the market. But when it came into the market, it decided, I will be a back specialist. To use a pun, it found its unique slot and backed into it. Okay, and Move's fortunes always went up since that point. So less is truly more.
Yes.
Just to give you one more power play from that book, is forgetting the past. Okay, and this comes from the fact that India had a great legacy in hockey. One of the least reported tales in Indian sport is Dhyan Chand was offered a job in the German army by Adolf Hitler because he was so impressed by his game, which he refused. Dhyan Chand refused that, and yet not many people know this. But Indian hockey had a great legacy, and we believed we were the best. And we were unwilling to forget our style of play, even though everything around in the game of hockey changed, and that cost us. In many ways, it's reflective of how Nokia lost their position in the cell phone market, because they only did incremental innovations. They didn't really look outside the field and see that they could somebody come in from outside and change the whole game, which iPhone did. So those are some power plays from Sportivity. And I thought you were only going to shoot me with a camera.
Okay, so sports.
Life.
Mom.
World.
Dad.
Saint.
Always.
Funny.
Favorite Avenger.
Iron Man.
Favorite superhero.
Batman.
Favorite quote.
There's my check. I would highly recommend that you subscribe to Jagged with Jasravee, because it is a hotbed of great content which offers some really interesting insights if you have interests in marketing, branding, advertising, or generally any sort of good content. Because I think this kind of content is what keeps us going during these difficult periods. And a big kudos to Jasravee for creating such a wonderful stage where people can come and get entertained and inspired. That's what we all need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you, Vinay.